What's up everybody, I'm Jesse Showalter and welcome back to the series all about how to design and code a responsive landing page from start to finish. In the last episode, we set up our development environment and got everything squared away to be really smooth for the project from start to finish. And in this episode and the following episodes, we're gonna start building out the website piece by piece. And today, we're tackling the navigation and the header of the site. Let's do it. The assets we're gonna need for the top portion of this design include that main background header. So we have this big hero background JPEG. I have our framed kind of like iPhone 10 with the application inside of it. And then down below that, I have Shoe App logo. I exported it out as a white SVG. That's why you can't see it in this preview, but I promise you it's there. So what I wanna do is just take that Finder window and put it back over there so I can always reference all my files over here in this panel. And the first thing I wanna do is I want to just get into my project through the terminal. So I'm gonna CD, which means to change directories, and then I'm gonna go into my sites directory. I'm gonna write / because then I'm also gonna go into my Shoe App landing page directory, and that's where my project's located. Now we're ready to get started, but before we do that, I wanna move all of my images that I have in this source folder right here. I wanna move all of those images over to the build folder. If you go into the assets, you can see there's nothing in there right now. So before we start watching the project and start working with code, I just wanna write Gulp images because that's one of my standalone Gulp tasks that we created that's in that starting file. And as soon as I press enter, the terminal is just gonna run it through the image processing. It's gonna crush all those images and make sure that they're in a lossless way, reducing the size of them. And now you can see I have my images over here, and they're really small, like 100 kilobytes, 149 kilobytes, 2 kilobytes. The next thing we're gonna do is, now that we've run that command to kind of minify and crush all of those images, we're just gonna write the default command, which is gulp, and that should start running our project. It's gonna open up our project in the browser, and it's exactly where we left it off. It's really, really boring, has that ugly gray background, and it has this horrible, headline that says Shoe App is coming soon. So we wanna just save that, remove the H1 and save it, and you'll see that immediately our page is updated in the browser. That lets us know that it's tracking the project. Everything's working really, really smoothly. Next thing we wanna do is just close up any of the directories we have going, and we wanna start fresh. So I'm just gonna delete that body style that we had. It's gonna be completely white and completely boring. And now we're gonna start building out our site, okay? So if I look over here at our design, we're gonna wanna come into the index.html. So I'm just gonna split these panes in my text editor so I can look at both things at one time. And I'm gonna pump up the size of the text so you can see it in the tutorial. I like to just start cranking out some HTML and getting some markup on the page. So let's do that. I'm gonna kick into here. Now, I'm also gonna come over to my sketch file and press Control L. I'm gonna bring up the grid. You can see everything is on the grid, which tells me that that 1140 kind of like width or whatever that was we had there, we're gonna wanna create some sort of containing element. Good news is, if I go to basics in my CSS and go to base, I've actually already created this style. I have a wrapper that's 1100 pixels and it's a class of wrapper. It's something I could use throughout the project. So I'm gonna want my background image to go real big, but then I'm gonna want inside of that contain that wrapper element. So that tells me right away that I'm gonna want to, let's see, I'm gonna do a section and I'm gonna give it an ID of header. And inside of the header, I'm just gonna wanna do a div with a class of wrapper. And inside of that, we're gonna wanna let's just test something really quick and see if it works. Test. So okay, so far so good. But what we should see is as I stretch the browser out, it's not staying full width. And that's because we have that 1100 pixel wide wrapper that's going on here. Let's just, so you can see it, let's give it a horrible background color of red. And now you can actually see there's our wrapper, okay? Everything's still left aligned, text is left aligned in there like it should be. But we have some sort of responsive nature to our site cooking already, which is kind of cool with just like one thing we did. So we're looking pretty smooth so far. We're just gonna delete that ugly red background. And now we're gonna want to start addressing the things that are specific to the home page. If it's specific to the home page, I'm gonna put it in this page home Sass, and I'm gonna talk about that ID of header, and we're gonna start affecting that thing. So let's do a background. and we're gonna do a URL because we're gonna wanna do an image, okay? You could do background or background image. I like to do it this way. And you have to remember where this is coming from. So we're in this, if you look at the build, we're inside of assets, inside of CSS. We're gonna wanna come out of the CSS folder into the images folder and then find our image, which is our hero background JPEG. So to do that, we're gonna go .. slash, and we're gonna say img, and then we're gonna call it hero background.jpg. And that's not how you spell JPEG, that's how you spell JPEG. And then after that, we could stop and we could write, you know, like background repeat after it, but I like to just write the shorthand for this and just write no repeat. So as soon as I press save, hopefully we have a little bit of background image kicking over there. It doesn't have an established height. It also doesn't have an established width. So you can see it's not repeating. And so it's just cutting that image off at its natural width. So it's like a 1440 wide image. That's 1440 if you ever wonder what it looked like in the browser, right? So we want that to span. So what we're gonna do is write background. We're gonna write background size, and then we're gonna write cover, okay? If I press save, you'll see that as I stretch the browser out, that background image is going to stretch out. You have to remember image resolution and quality. As you do this, the larger you go, the worse off it's gonna be. We could do some responsive image sizing, but I think we're gonna keep it pretty basic because this is a background image covered with a gradient. You know, it's okay. We can do it this way. So when it comes to height, do we want it to be a consistent height or do we want that height to actually vary depending on the browser? Well, let's try a couple things. We could say height and we could put, you know, something like 800 pixels. If we do that, it's gonna kick it out 800 pixels. And we could actually, you know, compare it to our sketch document and just bring back our controls. How high is this background? It's about 800 pixels. That was a total accident. I didn't actually know it was 800 pixels. I was just kind of guessing. It's pretty close. Maybe I should work at a carnival and guess people's age and weight. Career goals. So we could have it state 800 pixels. You can see the images stretching out as we go, or we could give it, you know, a dynamic height. Let's stay here and we'll come back. We'll see what we do because we might be able to change that. We could do percentage. We could even do something like 80 VH, which is viewport height. That's gonna put it 80% of the viewport and always 80%. So if the viewport is not as tall, it's gonna stretch the whole thing in relation or in context to the overall viewport height. But we may wanna do that, we may not wanna do that. Let's see what it looks like when we get the phone in there. Okay, so far so good. We have the header there, and let's see. Let's keep going on the old HTML train and see what else we need to put in there. Well, now we need to put that navigation, and we need to put the logo in there, okay? So let's do that. Okay, so how should we do this? Let's put a navigation tag, and inside of that, we'll do an unordered list. We'll give it a class of main-nav, and then we also wanna do LIs times how many? How many we got? We'll count the navigation. We'll count the logo as one of the navigations, so we'll call that 4, and inside of each one of those, we wanna have an A tag or like a link. So if I just press, you know, tab after that, we're gonna get that unordered list with all the list items and those tags. I'm just gonna highlight the parentheses. I'm gonna press Command D in my editor just to select all of the similar kind. And I'm just gonna stub or put in like a fake link, a hashtag, which basically makes the link go nowhere inside of there. And then just to test it out, I'm gonna write link. And let's come back over to our browser and just see what we got. Okay, we got link, 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 link. Cool. We're just gonna go with it like this. We will give maybe the first LI and image link a class of logo, and that's gonna designate that one as being special. And then we'll give the other one, the other A link, the very last one, a class of download. Okay, so you can see inside of our design what I'm kind of going for here. We're We're gonna give this one a class of logo, so it's special. I'm gonna show you a fun little trick to make navigations like this really, really easy to do. Okay, cool, so we have like our structure set in place there. After we do our nav still inside of our div, right? Our div with a class of wrapper, we're gonna wanna do, let's do our H1. Let's just call that the H1. Maybe it's not, we'd have to fix it later. Let's call it the H1, call it, let's copy the design. We'll say main headline, okay? And then after the main headline, we're gonna do a paragraph with some lorem ipsum. With Emmet installed, all you have to do is write the word lorem and press tab and it kicks it out and makes a whole kind of like sentence out of it. So that's pretty good. I just cut out some of the lorem ipsum and press save and come back, and we have that piece inside of our header as well. Next thing we need to do is we need to add that image. Okay, so that'll be cool. Let's do an image and we'll find the source. It should be, again, it's not slash because we're coming from the HTML this time. So we're gonna go into assets and we'll say img and we'll say shoe app, capital A for app, capital, ooh, that's a weird one, ios.jpg. We press save, we should see, hopefully, no, image source. We're gonna go into assets, img, shoe app, ios.jpg. Why are you not showing up? Is everything still running and reloading in the browser? Am I not finding this correctly? It should be inside of assets, img, and then shoe app ios.png. That's why you gotta watch the type of image it is. Duh. So let's make that a PNG, and there it shows up in our header. Golly, what was I thinking? Okay, cool. So all that's looking good. I feel like we have actually all the HTML on the page for our header. Now we just need to style this thing and actually make it look like our design and not like this clunky HTML just sitting on the page. So first thing we're gonna do is we are going to, let's do our logo. Let's start from the top left like you do. I'm just gonna double click on the logo, and you can see when we ran our SVG through our SVG OMG, it cleaned up the SVG. Now we wanna add this into our design, and there's a few ways you can do that with SVG. Number one, I could just come in here and instead of putting this word link in there, or right, if we had the word logo, you'd see that up in the actual like browser. But instead of having a word in there, we could, if you want to, you could just put the image straight in there and go through and link the whole thing, and that'd be fine. It's a white SVG, so it's exactly how we want it. We exported it like we needed it. It's just gonna be accessing and doing that whole thing. Or we could come in here and grab all of it, all the code, and we can just paste all of that code. All of those are vector points telling the browser how to actually draw the logo. Once we save that, you can see it just kind of pops up there. The cool thing about doing it this way is if you wanted to animate or change color or basically affect the SVG, you can do that by affecting the actual vector points or the properties with the code just embedded right there. And also, the site's not making another HTTP request and finding the images that it's connected to. So that's kind of the power of SVG, is like making your sites a little bit speedier, a little bit more efficient. So we're just gonna do it this way. I like that a lot. Okay, so far our navigation doesn't really look like a navigation. So let's get in there and make some changes there. We're just gonna make some changes to main nav. And I gotta say, I love using Sass because I don't have to type in a lot of curly braces. All I have to do is indent correctly and things just work. So I really, really like Sass for that reason, among others. I'm gonna come into main nav, and I might actually just start nesting things right away. So I'm gonna hit the LIs. Nope, I don't wanna do that. I'm gonna affect the LIs, and I wanna just take the list style, and I wanna set that to none. I'm gonna press save. All the little dots go away, so that's super duper sweet. Okay, cool, so we've taken away the standard list style. Why wouldn't I wanna do something like that in a global partial? Because list styles or dots, it's kind of like a global pattern you'd probably want elsewhere. So you want to change the things, that are affected least of all. You want to like specifically target those things and leave the global styles alone. That'll kind of help you to not go back and forth and be battling yourself later on in the project. So Okay, so now I think we want to actually make our navigation look more like a navigation. Let's do that. I want to come in and start actually affecting the link, the actual A tags. So first things first, I want to just color them. Like I said, we want to leave the link colors globally elsewhere to be something, not that blue. We'll go in there and change that in a little bit. But we want to just change them specifically to be inverted here. And the reason we're not doing this and trying to affect the list item is because the A tag, the link, is actually the thing that holds the majority of the power. So always try to work from the innermost thing, the innermost object, and kind of style that and make that work instead of styling multiple outer elements. Does that make sense? I hope it does. You'll see what I mean. So just to, give it a little bit of context, I'm going to give it that ugly red background color. Okay, cool. So far, so good. Let's do a border radius, just for the heck of it, of 4 pixels. What's the next thing to do? I'm gonna give it a little bit of padding, like that. I'm gonna give it, let's try 15 pixels top and bottom, and we'll go 30 pixels left and right. That's gonna, wow, it's gonna space them out and make them look funky. I promise it's gonna get okay, all right? Okay, so the text decoration, let's do none. Not that there was any on there, but just in case, all right? So far, so good. Okay, here's where the magic is gonna kick in. We're gonna use the power of Flexbox to straighten this navigation out and make it look super duper awesome. So I'm gonna come up here to the main nav. I'm gonna type in display flex, and you're gonna see things almost kind of line up, right? Oh, so far so good. Then what we need to do is come back into our A tag, and we need to display these in a block way, okay? That's gonna kind of shift everything up. And then what happens is when I pull the red off, oh my gosh, it's like lined up. But we need to figure out how to space my links, my 3 actual nav items over on the far right side of our wrapper, and keep our logo over on the left-hand side. Well, there's this really awesome little hack, and it goes like this. It's not a hack, it's good, it's solid code. I'm gonna address the actual list item, okay? But I'm gonna address the first child. Why did I just put a moon in there? Super weird. Okay, so I'm gonna address the first child of those list items. That's gonna be the logo, right? Cool. So I'm gonna give it a margin right, and I'm gonna set it to auto. And what it's gonna do is it's going to automatically fill the space in and push everything else to the right, which is really, really nice. You'll even see if I come in here in the inspector and I address this guy, you can see I'm gonna pull my browser out so it's larger. But look, it's automatically filled the space in between that one element and the other elements. This is a really easy way to line up your navigations and space them out if you do it in this kind of unordered list kind of way. Hey, that's looking pretty good. It's looking like a navigation right there. Let's check our sketch file, okay? So it looks like maybe it needs a little bit of padding from the top, and we can do that. We can just give it a margin from the top of maybe like 20 pixels, and it's gonna shoot it down just a tad bit. And those links are really, really little. So we're gonna wanna just up the font weight to as high as we can go, 900 probably. And we're going to want to text transform and make sure that everything is uppercase. So you can see in the sketch document, all of these are uppercase. Now, so is my actual browser stuff. So it's looking pretty good. And what I really like is, like we said when we affected the A, is your tappable or your kind of clickable area is not just the link itself, it's everything you've padded out around it. So addressing the actual smallest or most internal element, it's a really, really good practice. Okay, next thing we have to do is just kind of style this download button, which should be fairly easy. We can just come in here and we can affect a class of download. We're gonna give it a background of white. Okay, let's do that. Cool, cool, cool. We're gonna wanna change the color, and we're gonna want it to be this awesome blue color that we have, right? So I'm gonna use my color picker tool called Color Snapper if you're interested. And if we're gonna reuse this color, if you're gonna keep your code dry, don't repeat yourself, right? We're gonna wanna come up to our helpers and go to our variables and just call it something like ocean. We gotta give it the $sign to make it a variable. And then we're gonna give it the color. And now we can save that and we can come back into our home page here. We can give this a color of variable ocean. And that's gonna, whoa, didn't it? Why wouldn't it? OCEAN. How about A with a class of download? We just need to be a little bit more specific to kind of like override the link styles. You can see why, actually. I wanna show you this really quick. Specificity and nesting inside of Sass is very, very important. You can see inside of the main nav, I'm actually nesting my A tag. So when I open up my CSS, let's see if we can find it. Probably not. Where is it? Yes, there it is. So you can see this is actually nested code. It's actually dropped that main nav class on the A. So it's a little bit more specific than just the class of download. So we just had to like equal that. We could have put class of download inside. You know, I just want to be careful with nesting. You don't want to get too carried away. So sometimes it's nice to kick back out. So that's working pretty good. I feel like maybe we want to give these a little bit more padding. So let's do a padding of more like 50 pixels. That's good. And I feel like the padding is a little bit high. It's a little large, right, for what we have going on there. That's looking pretty good. Okay, now what we want to do is we want to do like a box shadow. I promised you a cool little trick to kind of like change the look of box shadows. Box shadow usually goes like this. We want to do the X value, which we're going to do 0. We want to do the Y value. Let's start out with 10 pixels. The blur value, let's start out with 10 pixels. And we want to do the color. We're going to do RGBA, so we can go 0, 0, 0, 0.5. Okay, that's black at a half opacity. Okay, now we have this really ugly border radius, now we have this really ugly box shadow, right? We need to fix this box shadow, and the first thing we want to do is we want to add one more parameter on it, which is actually to scale it down, to actually shrink it down smaller than the size of the element itself. So let's go, we want to shrink it down by 10 pixels. Whoa, that's growing it. Now let's do a negative and actually bring it internal. See that little thing right there? See it peeking out from the very bottom? That's pretty cool. So now what we can do is just kind of bump it down on the y-axis a little bit. Maybe 15 is too much. 12 is looking kind of good. And let's finish up by dropping the opacity of it so it's not so distinct. And there it is. We did our download button. Now we're just gonna come in here really quickly and change the HTML of these. Now you can see we have this awesome like navigation that actually has some responsive nature to it. So you can see like we drag it out, it stays within the container, drag it in, it starts to crunch. The minute it starts getting too close, later on in the series, we're gonna write a really cool media query to just drop that to a responsive navigation. So that's really cool. Navigation done. Now we just gotta pump out a few other elements. Okay, you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking I want to just like wrap these in something like an article tag. That might be kind of good. Just this guy right here. Let's do the whole thing. And the reason I might want to do that is because I might want to do some clever responsive stuff later. I can write some CSS for this article tag and actually give it like a width. Like I want to give it an 80% width. And obviously I just want to margin it like 0 on the top and bottom and auto on the left. And now everything's gonna stay there. I'm just really quickly, let's just give it an ugly red background. Poor red, it always gets like the worst kind of deal. So now it's 50%, right? Okay, pretty good. It's 50% of the width of the container, okay? So, because it's relative to the container. Actually, we said 80%. If I said 50, it'd be way smaller. So we don't wanna do that. We wanna do 80 wasn't bad. I'm thinking like, let's just copy this text exactly, okay? So let's just come in here and paste that in there. It's a little bit longer than maybe what we had in there was. And now we can kind of play and just say like, how big do we want that to actually be? I think that's pretty close. Like, we're getting some sort of weird thing with the headline. So I don't know what that's all about. Oh, that's why. How did that happen? Let's just save that again. Okay, everything's good. So we have our headline in there. We're probably gonna wanna just space these up there a little bit. If you're wondering why I'm getting this cool color like from my selection, that's actually just a selection colors like partial that I wrote. You can change like all the colors to stuff in there. So that's really nice. Okay, lastly, yeah, let's just do some spacing. You know, our H1s have some general space to them. So we might wanna say like that this H1 does not have like any margin to it. Let's do that. Just save that really quickly. Let's go margin bottom. We can just drop out the bottom margin stuff and maybe just give it like a little bit of margin. Okay, that looks really close to our design. It's really, really nice. The last thing I feel like we need to do is we need to cut off this this phone. Like, we need to find a way to cut off the phone so it doesn't drip outside of our containing element. We can come into the header and actually just write overflow auto, and when we set that to auto, it's gonna crop it so nothing travels past the parameters. It's gonna crop it so nothing travels past, you know, the size of that header. Now, you know, it's looking okay right now. The thing we might want to change is once we get in here, I mean, we're going to do a lot of this responsive work later on and come back and just fix a few things, but why not just fix like a basic thing right now, which would be as the browser shrinks, so should the phone, right? So we can go into our header and we can write a really simple like image style that just says, you know, max width of, I don't know, what is that, like 500 pixels? And then we can say width of 100%, okay? So I'm just gonna save that. It changed the size a little bit there, but now you can see as we shrink, now we're getting a little bit of like dynamic size to the phone, which is really, really nice. And last thing we can do is go back to our header and say, do we want the header height to actually shrink as the browser shrinks? So we're getting that much of the phone showing. So it might actually be it looks for some reason like it's a little bit higher than it should be. So we can actually just cheat it a little bit and hit it to 700 pixels. And then as we shrink, we're finding a size that works for most sizes, right? We're finding an image size that works for most browser sizes. And so we can come back in and write one media query later on as that thing breaks and just fix that spot. So I think that works really, really well. The last thing we're going to do for our project today is actually push all of our changes up to our repo and GitHub, and so we have all those saved and stored and ready for next time. So if we come to our project here, you can see it tells us we have 11 uncommitted changes. We've changed a little bit of the CSS, we've changed the HTML, we have removed some images, and so it's tracking all those changes like you can see here in our HTML. And we just want to say, you know, header styles. And we can give it a description that just says, built out the initial, I can't spell today, initial header of the site. Pretty cool. And we can say, let's say nav, logo, phone, background, etc. Cool. So we're gonna commit that to the master, and then we're gonna just press sync. We can actually just go and check GitHub really quickly, and it tells us 13 seconds ago we updated everything with the header style. So that's pretty cool. Our project is looking awesome, and in the next video we're gonna build out the logo section as well as that card or the key feature section, so stay tuned for that. Well, that's it. We're all done. We set up the navigation and the header to the site, and I think it's looking pretty good. There's some changes we're gonna make when we come back and start making everything a little bit more responsive, but you can see it's about 50% responsive already. As the browser shrinks and grows, it's already doing a little bit of the work, which is pretty cool. I wanna point out that while we were coding this piece of the site, we used pretty modern techniques to accomplish everything. We didn't float or clear a single thing. Nothing's absolutely positioned. And as we started the project, we're already thinking of varying screen sizes and how the site needs to be responsive at the end. We got to play with Flexbox, and in the next video, we're gonna be tackling just a little bit of CSS Grid, which is the awesome new way to make layouts. In this episode, we also pushed everything up to our GitHub repo, and in the next episode, we're gonna be diving a little bit deeper into things like branches and pull requests using Git. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I really had a lot of fun making this one. If you did enjoy it, make sure you leave a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. There's lots more videos in this series and other videos coming as well, so maybe stick around. If you have any questions, leave them down in the comments, and you can find all of the code that I pushed on the repo, and the link is down in the description as well. I hope you guys are having an amazing week. I hope you're designing amazing things. I hope you're coding amazing things, and I can't wait to see you guys in the next one. See ya.